What's up guys, it's Punchy, and today we're back with another weekly Deepwoken update that has a lot of stuff for you to enjoy. When it comes to flipping the meta, there's a lot of that in today's patch. Last week, we received an entirely new legendary with the BLOODFOULER, which was kinda busted for Bloodrend, and the new Twin Strikes mantra. Honestly, it was pretty substantial content-wise, but let's move on to this week. As always, if you truly want that full experience, I do recommend hopping in game and testing everything for yourself. Anyway, as always, if you want exclusive update content just like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Seriously guys, I'm not gonna do any more aura farming, so don't worry about that. And without further delay, let's get right into it. Added in today's update was a major overhaul in how player names and information are displayed above their heads. Previously, you could see normal text of a player, their relation to you, and their guild status, but the text and font were much of the same with little to no variation. This is a bit different in the current update, and it looks cool. Players will now display their guild status alongside their guild icon, followed by their family relation to you, then listing their name, and finally underneath their title if it's there. Overall, I think this new system is really interesting and better to look at, but when it comes to visual clutter, it actually might be harder to see with all of the text. Personally, I like how all of this looks, but leave your own thoughts down below. Additionally, added today are new secret regalias. To be honest, there were only 4 in the current game before this, and they could have massive impact, such as the secret animal king or 0 just being more XP or a funny meme, but I'm not sure what they are. But based on the other regalias, if you wipe, there's a chance to obtain them or maybe earn them, but seriously, I have no idea. Check it out and get to hunting. A pretty small but appreciated change came to the fishing minigame in Deepwoken. Overall, this minigame was chill and alright for farming some decent loot, but there was one major issue that absolutely everyone hated, even if you didn't even fish yourself. In summary, to pull something up from the sea, you had to spam click your mouse while inputting a direction, which was terrible to say the least. Luckily, forcing players to click has been removed, allowing players to hold the direction of the fish while granting a larger window to switch between directions. Finally, this minigame has chilled out and isn't the mouse-breaking experience that we've come to know. Next up, with some major combat changes that affect almost everyone, we got a weird adjustment coming to HYPERARMOR and its mantra interactions. This is pretty big, but using any mantra under any HYPERARMOR will now remove it entirely and stop you from taking any hits. This won't be changing too much in overall gameplay unless you're actually gaining HYPERARMOR before throwing out some mantras, but it should shut down some cheese. Moving on to some big gameplay balancing, there's a lot here to discuss. I'll be highlighting just a few, but there is a lot here that's going to alter the meta in both PvE and PvP combat. Let's begin with some weapon changes. Kicking off the changes to the newly added legendary, the Bloodrend BLOODFOULER, this has received some nerfs to its overall gameplay and stats. For some increased cooldowns, the BLOODFOULER's standing critical cooldown has been raised from 5 seconds to 6 seconds, while the running critical cooldown has been shifted the same rate from 6 seconds to 7. Overall, this isn't too game-changing or crazy, but it should reduce critical spam and DPS for the weapon. Next, onto the Unbright WITHERBLADE, we're finally seeing some support for this weapon, which I'm excited to use. For starters, the Unbright WITHERBLADE medium scaling has hopped up, as well as its base damage. The critical damage has also been buffed, but its cooldown has been increased, which is a fair exchange. This thing was dealing pitiful damage when it was initially nerfed, and this, I guess, is a starting point. To end off the stat buffs, this weapon also got a small range buff from 7.5 to 8.0, which is huge. Additionally, with its status, the Unbright WITHERBLADE now applies more wither on successful M1s, which is a decent upgrade to this really rare weapon. Finally, Withering Soul, the talent from the Darkened Bastion armor, will now stack successfully with both the Deep Spindle and the WITHERBLADE, increasing wither M1 damage even further. Honestly, this is big, and I hope it's usable in combat because the WITHERBLADE has been terrible since its release. To further elaborate upon the wither status itself, it's been changed fundamentally when it comes to the calculation. Beforehand, all forms of wither, the health capping status, was being applied at a flat value, ignoring damage multipliers and all forms of damage reduction. Luckily, this has been removed, allowing for wither to calculate with damage multipliers and damage reduction, as they should like anything else. This isn't exactly a nerf or a buff, but it's more consistent in line with armors, with charm, stuff like that, that's going to be changing the damage you take. Up next, with a small but interesting change, was the buff coming to the Night Axe. attacks. There's nothing too game-changing about this, but its base damage was actually increased, which is kinda crazy since the weapon was already good and unique before this change. Anyway, now let's talk about some attunement changes because there's a few in particular that need some focus. For starters, we got a lot of GALEBREAThe nerfs here and there besides some bug fixes which make the attunement a little bit more usable. Beginning with Updraft, this mantra now deals reduced base damage and diminishes in its damage as more of the multi-hits land. This mantra was kinda crazy with its output and could just be thrown out whenever, but it's received a sizable damage change with this adjustment. Further nerfing Wind, we got the same treatment in PvE coming towards Tornado. So this mantra was the absolute best for multi-hitting enemies anywhere, but now it scales down in damage as you land more of the hits. Unfortunately, instead of dealing consistent or increasing damage, it's going to ramp down and decrease as the mantra continues to land. Finally, moving on to Rising Wind, we have some adjustments, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily weaker or stronger. First, this mantra deals less damage with the reduction of its scaling and no longer ragdolls players as it finishes. Overall, this is more of a neutral reset after landing Rising Wind, no longer setting up combos, but to compensate for these nerfs, it raises players into the air during its animation and as it finishes. Finally, onto some insane attunementless changes. We got massive nerfs coming to a few of these mantras, and I hate to see it. For starters, Pressure Blast, the heavy mantra, is no longer unparryable, letting players defend. Since the game's release, this has consistently stayed a great option for, well, pressure, but now it has counterplay and defense starting today since we can parry. Additionally, Rapid Punches, a really decent approach and catching tool, caught one of the largest strays that I've seen in a while. This mantra was honestly great for aggressive play and punishing rolls, but now I think it's been doomed. Rapid Punches is now 360-degree blockable from any angle after the first tick of damage, which is just unfortunate to say the least. We'll see if this holds up in the modern Deepwoken landscape, but honestly, this doesn't look good. For right now, that's really about it, but there's further balancing to explore in the game and in the listed patch notes. There's definitely a lot here that I didn't mention, but I think I highlighted some of the crazier ones. Anyway, as always, feel free to head in game and join up for Battle Royale or even Gladiators, and you might see my team if you're lucky. Thank you so much to all my loyal fans and members who support my channel directly, and if you like what I do, feel free to join up down below for even more content. If you want to contact me directly and have all the updates for my videos and channels, join my Discord down below. Also, if you want to play with my guild, the Apothecary, that server will be linked too. As always, thank you again, and make sure to like and subscribe. I'm shooting for 110k subs, and we're only 2,000 away, so let's hit that goal. Have a good one. It's punching time.